With each new day, more and more vaccines are getting into arms. Highly effective, safe.
A shot for every U.S. adult by the end of May.
My hope is by this time next year, we're going to be back to normal.
Colorado already passing major milestones in the effort to protect our neighbors. And the vaccine supply is set to skyrocket soon.
Caught off guard by extended quarantine rules.
The first I heard about this 24-day quarantine was when the Colorado Department of Health and Environment contacted me.
How a COVID variant diagnosis completely derailed one family's plans.
And questioning the investigators. Tense moments tonight as Aurora City Council members grill the independent team behind the report into Elijah McClain's death.
And we begin tonight with breaking news. A missing 12-year-old Parker girl has been found safe. Less than 3 hours ago, the Douglas County Sheriff announced Catherine Gould was found in Arapahoe County, close to Cherry Creek State Park. Her family reported her missing this morning after she set off for school on her bike from her home in Parker and never made it to class. The Douglas Sheriff says kidnapping has been ruled out and they will be doing an extensive investigation into what happened.
Here's some good news. In the battle to contain the coronavirus, President Biden says he expects there will be enough vaccine supply to cover every adult in the U.S. by the end of May. That's 2 months earlier than expected.
And some of that comes down to a production boost for the recently approved Johnson & Johnson vaccine. The Biden administration says rival drug maker Merck agreed to produce the single-shot vaccine, ramping up the supply. Good evening and welcome to Denver7 News at 10. I'm Ann Trujillo.
And I'm Jessica Porter. Thank you for joining us. Another win. Governor Polis says our state hit its target of vaccinating 70% of people age 70 and older by the end of February.
In fact, we overachieved by a bit. More than 397,000 people in that group got their shot. The target was just under 394,000.
It matters because nearly 4 in 5 COVID-related deaths in our state came from the 70 and older age group.
Now, if you are 70 and older and you still have not been vaccinated, you are the priority in Colorado right now. And the good news is more vaccine doses are coming our way. And the first big change, more than 45,000 of the Johnson & Johnson shots are expected to arrive in our state by Friday. And the coming weeks are looking good. In the first week of April, the state is expected to receive roughly 390,000 doses of the vaccine. That is more than double the number of doses we received in the first week of February, and the supply is expected to keep on growing.
President Biden says he wants to make sure all teachers have at least 1 dose of the vaccine by the end of this month. It's part of his plan to speed up the return to in-person learning. Starting next week, he plans to use the federal pharmacy program, which offers shots at neighborhood pharmacies to prioritize teachers. And Colorado is making strong progress in its effort to vaccinate educators. Our state already vaccinated more than 75% of teachers and child care workers. The original goal was to hit 75% by Friday. Well, despite all of the success, the CDC is warning that COVID-19 variants could derail our progress.
And variant cases are already popping up here in Colorado, and these variants are more contagious and call for even more restrictive quarantine protocols.
As Denver7's CB Cotton reports, that can translate into a lengthy stay at home.
For the past year, staying within the walls of your own home has been a precaution against COVID-19 and a promise if you or someone you've been near test positive for the virus.
We're more than happy to keep the community safe, but the last thing we want to do is expose anybody in the community.
So when Rachel Haig's au pair tested positive for COVID-19, she was prepared to stay home and stay isolated from the au pair.
Immediately that day, she isolated downstairs in the basement. She has her own bedroom and bathroom down there, and nobody has been down there since she isolated.
She wasn't prepared for an email from CDPHE last week that said she and her family have to quarantine until March 15th, over 3 weeks from when the au pair first showed symptoms.
She told me that her specimen had been flagged as a variant, and that because it had been flagged as a variant, there are different quarantine requirements.
Haig explained to CDPHE that she and her family had remained completely isolated from the au pair in a separate portion of the house.
We have a gate at the top of the stairs, so the only person that's been down there has been myself, fully masked with gloves, face shields, to bring her food and change out her dishes and sanitize everything.
And because of their isolation efforts, Hague found out on Tuesday that their quarantine time would be shortened. But the state did confirm to Denver7 that some situations involving variants could result in 24-day quarantines.
I don't know what people would do when they learn about a 24-day quarantine.
Here's how it could play out. The state says the longest quarantines are for those exposed to COVID-19 variants. Anyone identified as a close contact of a COVID-19 variant must quarantine for 14 days. What you may not know is that if you have ongoing contact with the infected individual, you can't begin quarantine until the infected person completes a 10-day isolation period. In total, that's 24 days you could end up at home.
We live in a free society and we should probably know what the rules are. There should be some official guidance on either the Colorado State website or the CDC website.
The state tells Denver7 they screen all of their positive COVID-19 tests for variants, and only about 3% of the ones from private labs. They hope to get that number up to 5% in the near future. CB Cotton, Denver7.
CB, thank you. Tonight, the superintendent of Adams' 12 five-star schools is making an impassioned plea for a change in quarantine rules for student athletes. Chris Godowski says the current standards call for student athletes to stay clear of athletics for 14 days, while other students and staff can return to class within 7 days if they receive a negative COVID test. In a letter to state health staff, the superintendent calls it, quote, the most unjust and irrational agency position that I've seen adopted in the more than 25 years that I've served as a school attorney and superintendent of schools. He says several student athletes will be forced to sit out of regional competitions this week because of the quarantine rules.
We did find out that Season C sports will begin practice this week after the state approved variances. That includes football, boys soccer, and girls volleyball. Chasta says football begins practice on Thursday for the 48 teams that skipped their season last year, and games will begin March 18th. And all other sports begin practice on Monday and competition on March 15th. The Douglas County School Board is recommending middle and high school students go back to full-time in-person classes by March 22nd. That's less than 3 weeks. Students who choose e-learning will stick with that routine, and the board says any student who wants to do occasional remote learning would need to set that up in advance with their principal. It would only be allowed if they're facing difficult circumstances.
Good news for businesses in Arapahoe County. Some of them are now able to ease back coronavirus rules. While Arapahoe County as a whole is in level yellow, some businesses are getting a head start on the rebound through approval for the five-star program. By meeting its higher COVID safety standards, they can move down to looser level blue rules. It means higher capacity gaps and last call at midnight instead of 11 p.m.
I know it's hard to believe, but Friday officially marks 1 year since Colorado saw its first confirmed case of the virus. And to mark this somber anniversary and to remember the lives we lost, Governor Jared Polis will address the state. That will be at 6:30 p.m. on Friday, and his address will be followed by a moment of silence. And we will have live coverage both here on air, online, and on our streaming apps.
Tonight, Aurora City councilors had their chance to question the independent investigators about a more than 150-page report released last week on the death of Elijah McClain.
And this report found police should have never stopped Elijah McClain in the first place. It also found flaws in the investigation that followed and questioned the use of ketamine. It also gave several recommendations for change within the police department.
Denver7 Sloan Dickey joins us live with more.
Well, at least one city council member questioned the integrity of that report, but most just wanted answers as to how to move forward as a city. Remember, that report encouraged a complete overhaul of the Aurora Police Department's post-incident review process, and several city councilors questioned the department's internal affairs policies. Right now, only Aurora's police chief can authorize an independent investigation. The independent investigators tonight reiterated they believe an internal affairs investigation should be automatic and not just rest solely on the chief's decision. decision. Now, when it comes to ketamine, one counselor pointed out that Aurora follows the same policies as several other nearby cities, but independent investigators say Aurora is in a unique position to modify those. But one councilman, Dave Gruber, wasn't happy with the findings, calling it a, quote, matter of opinion. He questioned the report's findings about the legality of the initial stop, saying it was legal and according to the 17th Judicial District. And as for the so-called flawed investigation that followed, here's what he had to say.
What that implies is that the Aurora Police Department was colluding with the Denver Police Department and colluding with the district attorney of the 17th Judicial District, and because of the evidence that came from the coroner, colluding with the coroner. So are you saying that collusion occurred, that they were working in such a way so as to not fairly?
That's not what we're saying. That's not what we're saying at all.
You know, I can watch a Broncos game and the next day I can tell you everything they did wrong. But at the same time, it's not, I wasn't there.
Is there a constitutional requirement to stop if a police officer tells you to stop?
No, there's not.
I appreciate those answers. It appears some of my colleagues, the Constitution is only, it's just when they want to use it when it's convenient for them, because there were several constitutional violations that happened in this stop, and they don't seem to mind that.
Now, keep in mind, tonight's discussion focused solely on that report and its findings. There are still many more conversations to come about changing policy in the future. Reporting live in Aurora, Sloan Dickey, Denver7.
For many years, we've had a divestment that's happened in this neighborhood.
Looking to the past to inspire its future, one group is ready to breathe new life into this Denver neighborhood.
We have to start somewhere, and we think art is the way to do it.
The creative approach they're supporting to help 5 Point's culture and history shine.
And meeting resistance. Why some Colorado counties have a beef with a proclamation from Governor Polis.
60s today, 70s, and snow both in the 7 day.